So what is architecture? Well, that's a very big question, and I wouldn't be surprised if each of us, had our own particular definition with a lot of overlapping similarities. In a word, architecture is sort of Lucan. Lucan said it best: buildings shelter man. Architecture shelters the spirit of man. And I think that's a very profound statement. But I would add to it that architecture is that what is left behind and defines our culture. If you go through or study architectural history, study ancient history, period, what you have to study is the stones that were left behind. Cities were places for expertise to be developed. You had your poets, you had your weavers, you had your cobblers, you had your farmers, and you had your masons. And as the centuries go by, what's left of that city is what the Masons did. And the Masons were the first architects. And so we were able to study those ancient cultures through what they left behind, and they left behind architecture. It's a wonderful history of structures. You look at the Aztec ruins, and you look at the stone lintels of Machu Picchu, and it was post and beam, columns and beams. And then the Greeks, an advanced society, which actually came before, and their architecture, the temples, the Acropolis, it's columns and beams, and the columns were spaced very close together because their beams were not capable of spanning very far. Romans come along and they invent the arch. Changed everything. Column spacing starts to get wider. In that invention led to another invention, which you might think was merely a refinement or an improvement over the semicircular arch, but it was the pointed arch. And that transferred the loads in a different way, which led to the buttresses, which led to these soaring cathedrals with stained glass walls, because the forces were carried to a skeleton on the outside of a building. Isn't that thrilling? That is architecture. That the intersection of structure and art and culture. And another definition, contemporary definition, might be it's where all the parts are related to all the other parts, and that nothing's arbitrary. There's reasons for everything. So I agree with Frank Lloyd Wright. I think architecture is the mother art. All the other ones are very important, but the art of architecture is what has defined our culture for a millennium. When did I start my practice? Well, I can tell you I started my practice when I was around 6 years old. And, of course, that was just playing and recognizing. And actually, even at that age, I could respect my obvious attraction to what I would later find out was architecture. And even later, I'd find out how to spell it. But, I was an insatiable kid when it came to knowledge, and my mother, my beautiful mom, would take these women's magazines back in the 50s, And then back then, modernism was, it was finding itself, and it was very important, and it was influencing everything, and even conventional magazines that were written for women would feature home design, modern home design, and with photographs and floor plans, and I was able to take those floor plans and study them, and I would challenge myself, and I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, trying to find the point in the floor plan where the photograph was taken. Nobody asked me to do it. Nobody told me to do it. I was just interested in doing that. What I didn't realize was I was teaching myself how to think in three dimensions, which is essential, when you're an architect. And so, I started a long time ago. Now, in terms of, the practice, the legal definition of practice, I started in 1979. I was, funny thing, that never was an aspiration that I had to have my own company, my own firm, my own studio. It was more of a very spontaneous happenstance. I'm a good worker, and although I had a day job, and working in an architect's office, I would take on moonlighting opportunities. People would find out I worked for an architect, and I wasn't licensed at the time, but they would take advantage of that and think they were getting some architectural advice or work or design for a discount. They probably were taking advantage of me. I don't care. I was able to practice architecture, and more importantly, I was able to begin to feel the weight of the responsibility of having my own studio. But I got so busy that eventually I had to make a choice, and I made a good choice. I quit my day job, and I went into private practice. Sounds impressive. However, back then in the 70s, 79, all you needed was a drafting board and a parallel bar and some pencils and some tracing paper. Didn't have insurance. I had a mortgage. I had a spare bedroom, a Volkswagen, good to go. And my only overhead was a printing bill. And fortunately, I had wonderful clients that trusted this kid with a whole lot of money. And I also built my first two houses. It was more like I was a general contractor for my first two houses. Again, I had no experience in doing that either. But it's, when you just jump in head first, you got to figure it out. And it's one hell of an education. And it just grew. It grew from there. And again, I was very lucky in that I had a younger brother who recognized that architecture not only is an art, but it's also a business. That's the part that comes with the responsibility. And when he arrived 5 years after I started Jones Studio, his main focus was to develop Jones Studio into a legitimate, credible business. First thing we have to do is get out of the third bedroom and actually get some office space, which we did in this beautiful, modern steel and glass building by one of Arizona's pioneer modernists, Al Beadle. Never thought we would be in that same space for 38 years, and expanded, of course. We went from a little, one bay leased space to multiple bays, and before we decided to build our own building.